Alabama on the road in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's the third Saturday in October, baby. By the end of the night, there will be cigar smoke in the air one way or another. Alabama is a 3-point favorite in this matchup. It's going down at 3:30 Eastern, over under set at 54 and a half. Had a little bit of line movement on that as far as the over under. Here's the premise that I'm kind of feeling for this football game. I think I think that Ryan Williams is about to have a big day. I think he's the X factor in this football game overall. I think Alabama is going to be able to figure out a way to get some yards through the air, unlike any team that's went against Tennessee's defense so far this season. Let's jump into the matchup. We'll go team by team here. Let's start off. We'll go with Tennessee first and put some stats up there on your screen, and we'll kind of talk through this. Uh, we'll go Tennessee's offense first. Look, Nico's struggling right now. Mason, Nico is not able to hit enough explosive plays in this offense right now to be able to keep defenses at bay. It really seems like Nico is having trouble with the long ball. We've seen tons of misses this season. Tennessee is getting man-to-man looks against their wide receivers right now, and their wide receivers, I think, are winning probably 40 to 50% of those battles. But Nico's having a hard time getting them the football, and part of the reason of that is the offensive line. There's been certain times this season where the offensive line has had some guys banged up, but in general, this offensive line has been a little bit underwhelming. Definitely, I would say the weakest part of the offense, at least as of right now. 81st in the country in sacks allowed. And look, Nico is a first-year starter. I feel like the expectations were just through the roof for Nico. And we came on here a couple weeks ago and we said, hey, we need to just cool it down a little bit. A lot of pressure on this guy. And it seems, just watching him play, it seems like he's a guy that's playing under a lot of pressure. And the offense has certainly struggled because of it. This is a run-first offense. Dylan Sampson is really, really good. You see the rushing numbers there on your screen. Even in the games where defenses have really loaded up the box to stop the run against Tennessee, Tennessee has been able to their defense has been able to keep them in the game. We'll talk about the defense here in a second. This is a defensive-led football team. But late in the game, the running game has been able to get going just enough to be able to squeak out most of these victories. Obviously, the loss to Arkansas there, the only loss for Tennessee so far this season. Let's talk defense. The front seven's been really good. I mean, there's really not much else to say about that. I mean, it's really good. These guys play very physical. They're very deep. There's three groups of, at least to start the season, there was three groups of defensive linemen that could rotate in and out. I mean, it was really, really impressive and continues to be impressive. And I think that the Tennessee defense is definitely one that is very stout, very stout. But there is a caveat. Their secondary has not been tested. And you see some of the stats here on this page. The numbers look fine. The numbers look good, statistically good. Haven't really been allowed a ton of explosive plays through the air. Haven't allowed a lot of yards through the air. They've been really, really good. But if you go back and look at who Tennessee has played, it kind of makes a little bit of sense. And it's not all the fact that they haven't played good passing offenses, but it does have something to do with it. And it does count for something. I mean, we're 6 games into the season at this point. We have to take what we've, the numbers we have at this point and what we've seen on the field has to mean something. And this Tennessee secondary hasn't been tested. They've done everything they're supposed to do this season, though. 170.2 pass yards per game. That's 19th in the country. 6.5 yards per pass allowed. That's 38th in the country. I mean, what else do you really? I mean, maybe they could have got a extra turnover or two, maybe, but they've done everything they've been asked. But they ain't been tested, and they've been a couple of times. The defensive line, the front seven in general, has overwhelmed the opposing offense and didn't allow them to get the ball down the field or allow any routes to really develop, or at least long routes. Um, I think Alabama has a good enough offensive line to be able to protect against this really awesome front seven that Tennessee's got, good enough to let Ryan Williams cook. And Alabama, they do have a good offensive line. When everybody's healthy, they have a really good offensive line. Caden Proctor is an absolute animal, right? You got the center that comes in from Washington. He's been really good. Tyler Booker is one of the best in the country, absolute road grader. And Alabama's got a couple of really good running backs in Haynes and Miller. So um, I think Alabama has got enough here on offense to be able to put at least enough points up on the board where I don't know that Tennessee's going to be able to reach them, man. This Tennessee offense is really limited right now. The one thing that could change that would be Nico being able to hit a long play, stretch that defense out in this football game. Like I said, there's been wide receivers that have been open, but it's always an overthrow with Nico. It's an overthrow every single time. Um, first year starter stuff. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. I don't think that means that Nico's not going to be any good. Uh, in the grand scheme of things, but right now he is going through first year starter woes of an SEC quarterback. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're Quinn Ewers or Carson Beck. If it's your first year, you're going to make some mistakes in this league, and there's a learning curve. So, with all that being said, you see some of the stats there for Alabama defensively. The weakness of Alabama's defense is their secondary. Everybody saw what Georgia did to them the second half of their game. Georgia absolutely toasted their butt. Alabama's saving grace was being able to create turnovers in the secondary. Now, me personally, I don't think that Alabama's secondary is that great. I think that Carson Beck threw up some freebies in that football game. Carson Beck has been working through some things the last few weeks, it seems to me. I don't think this secondary is very good for Alabama. But I don't know that Tennessee's offense has what they need to be able to test it. They haven't showed their propensity to be able to do it anyway. We all know what Alabama's been going through. Lost to Vandy. Close game with South Carolina. I mean, that close. South Carolina should have beat Alabama. I mean, let's just be real. And that was at Alabama, by the way, folks. So things are tumultuous in T-Town, to say the least, right now. And to quote Paul Feinbaum, Kalen DeBoer's smile is wearing thin with Alabama fans right this second. It seems like it's a team, in my opinion, this is just my opinion. It seems like the players run this football team. And that's a major identity and culture change considering what Alabama's came from. And that's not even to mention new offensive coordinator, new head coach, new defensive coordinator. All knew everything. All knew everything. So to sit here and act like I'm surprised that Alabama has went through some woes this season, I think is just not being truthful with myself. I have the utmost respect for Alabama, no doubt. But no team can go through all the changes that they went through over the last, year to 18 months or whatever, and go through a whole season in the SEC without some hiccups. We talked about it a little bit, Mason. Kalen DeBoer is one of those guys. Look at the games throughout his career. He plays close games. I think Alabama will continue to play close games as long as Kalen DeBoer's the head coach. He's always got a plan at the end of the game, it seems. He's one of those schemers that schemes from the first quarter to call things in the fourth quarter. He's brilliant. But they play close games. And he's not a disciplinarian or anything like that. And it's really interesting to see what's going on in Alabama with the change of culture and the regime change. As I said, I don't like the secondary very much. I think the defensive line is average. I think the linebacker room is really good for Alabama. I think it's one of the best in the country when they're healthy. Um, the defensive line. This isn't one of those defensive lines that's got Mount Cody on it or something like that. What's your take on this game? I've got Alabama being able to cover this 3 here. I don't think it's some kind of blowout. I like the under in this football game. I've actually already bet the under. It's all that line has already shrunk down a point or two. I think 1 point since we talked on Sunday. So I like Alabama -3 if I had to play the spread in this football game, but I like the under. I think this is going to be a defensive football game played in, I think, the 20s.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I look at these two teams, I feel like they are so similar in the past 3 weeks, right? Um, you know, well, I guess the past 2 weeks, going into this third week here now. But we saw Alabama obviously lose to Vanderbilt, then play South Carolina really close. And we saw Tennessee lose to Arkansas and then play Florida really close. Two very similar games there for both
That's
teams.
true.
So
I didn't even think of that.
yeah, and then they come in to face one another and look pretty similar, in a lot of aspects. It's a really interesting point of view, I think, to go into this game. Nobody would have expected it, especially after Alabama beats Georgia. Everybody was expecting this was going to be a top five matchup. I mean, we had it written in stone just about. And instead, we see a couple of lackluster weeks from both programs. And my question is, which team, which team's players are going to respond better to the adversity? Right now, I feel like Tennessee has a better overall culture and program. Just given where Josh Heupel is at, the fact that he's got more tenure, he's got players in the program for longer. Whereas obviously Kalen DeBoer, it's his first year, and he's changing the culture. It is a more player led program than it was in years past, and I wonder if that's not a detriment to Alabama. Looking at the body language on the sideline, I like Tennessee and what their body language was against Florida a lot more than I liked Alabama's body language against South Carolina. Both teams ended up winning the football game, so it didn't matter at the end of the day. But you know, you can't be a player on either of these teams and feel like things are going great. So who put in the work this week? That's what I want to know. Who put in the work this week to get better? And it really kind of comes down to the players, the player leadership on the team. I think more so than the coaches. These players have to be mad at themselves for performing the way that they have with the rosters that they have over the past couple of weeks. So to me, when I look at the two teams, I do feel like Tennessee has a cultural edge going into this football game right now, whereas Alabama is still trying to find itself. That's an intangible thing. That's not, you can't see that necessarily in any stat book or anything like that. But it is a huge part of football. There's a lot of players on this team, and to have the proper culture going into a football game is very very important. But we can't really look at that and tell. One thing we can look at though is the fact that Alabama's receivers are really freaking good. Namely, namely Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard have both been playing well. It sounds like Kendrick Law is going to be back for this game. Kobe
Hmm.
Prentice is out with a head injury. I don't know
Oh,
if Kobe
okay.
Prentice is going to be able to go or not. So that is a concern for me. But I agree with you, Mark. I think that I mean you have to give the edge to Alabama's receivers in this football game over Tennessee's secondary. Tennessee's secondary gave up 300 yards almost against Arkansas, which I like Armstrong a lot. I like Taylor Green a pretty good bit, but Taylor Green's also completing 56% of his passes, so he's not out there just looking like a tactician or anything like that. But the, my point in saying that is they gave up 300 to Arkansas. what is Alabama going to do, right? Um, and then Alabama too. This kind of leads me to another point, but Alabama has been really effective at running the football. Now, I don't necessarily think that that needs to be the game plan going against Tennessee, but they've been really effective at running the football, and it seems like they just abandon it every freaking game. They've got two of the best running backs in college football in Jam Miller and Justice Haynes, or in the SEC, I would say at least. Two, one of the best tandems of running backs, and a really good offensive line, particularly against or in the running game. And they seem to abandon the run, um, you know, a lot faster than they should. So that's a concern for me for Alabama moving forward. But you don't go into Tennessee thinking that you're going to run for 200 or 300 yards either. So it doesn't really have much of an effect on this game. But it's kind of a side note for me there. Um, but when you
Can
look
I
at
one thing I just wanted to interject. The only way I could see that being a problem in this football game for Tennessee is if their offense can't sustain drives, and we have seen
Mhm.
that a little bit. Now we talked about the depth on Tennessee's defense. That's great. Depth is awesome, but if your offense can't get a first down and give those guys a breather, then by the end of this football game, Alabama will be able to cram it down Tennessee's throat, and it won't be Tennessee defense's fault. It'll be the offense's fault.
Right, and that's kind of been the Achilles heel for Heupel and the Tennessee team for his entire tenure at Tennessee is when the offense isn't clicking, it the the blows to the defense are multiplied because they happen more and more frequently. You can't go 3 and out and take 35 seconds off the clock. Like that's not good. So, and we really haven't seen Tennessee on offense. Speaking of that, we really haven't seen them play up tempo as much, and I wonder if that's
Mm-mm.
because of the concern for what Tennessee has had, or is it the opposite? Is there a concern by the coaching staff that Tennessee can't perform offensively, so they play a little bit slower to protect the defense, or is the fact that they're playing slower causing the offense to have issues and causing Nico to not get into rhythm? I don't, which came first, the chicken or the egg? I mean, that's the question there. But it is something that we can see before our eyes. I mean, we saw them play hurry up until the Arkansas game, but and now all of a sudden it seems like they're just slowing everything down and playing at a much slower tempo. It'll be interesting to see how they come out in this game. I'm looking at Tennessee's defense, and I'm wondering where James Pierce is at. Right? Is he going to get involved in this game? Because I think he is an X factor for Tennessee's defense. Alabama's offense, as good as they are at run blocking, and they've been decent at pass blocking as well, but we've also seen Jalen Milroe running for his life really the past 2 weeks, namely in South Carolina. I mean, South Carolina's got a really good defensive line, and they're extremely effective at disrupting the passer. I don't think that Tennessee's defense is built that way on their defensive line. I think they're equally as good, but Tennessee's defense has got to get to Jalen Milroe and create some pressure and allow him to make some mistakes because he's been making mistakes with that pressure, like most quarterbacks do. But I think that that's got to be a recipe for success for Tennessee. No Keelan Peely, he's out or Keenan Peely, he's out for the remainder of the season with that leg injury.
Oh,
So
that
we
that
won't
must
be
be who
seeing him.
Jeremiah's talking about right there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and but
Arian Carter is a beast, though, man.
absolutely, absolutely. Aaron Carter can definitely step up, but he was already playing anyways. So,
Right.
he may take over the comms and the mic, but you still got to roll in another linebacker. I think they'll be fine at the linebacker position, but that does hurt the depth. This is a 26-year
Hmm.
old veteran coming off the defense that you lose that leadership. So that is a big loss. But all right. So I gave you all that. I do think that Alabama's going to get the chunk plays. I'm kind of with you, Mark. I feel like the Alabama offense is going to have a path to success over the top of the Tennessee defense a little bit more than Tennessee is going to have success in passing the football against Alabama's defense. I do think that Alabama's defense you mentioned that you don't really care for them. You don't feel like they're all that great. I think
Who's
that they're
that?
just very Alabama's defensive backs.
Oh,
Um,
secondary. Yeah.
yeah, in the secondary, I think that they're very inexperienced and they're getting better, week in and week out. They just had one of the best defensive back classes ever. They had 3 5 stars, uh, you know, come in or get recruited into the program, and a lot of those guys are playing. So, Damani Jackson has been a ball hawk. He seems to have a nose for the football. I think he could be a factor in this football game. It sounds like he is going to play this week. He also went out with an injury last week, um, but my point in saying that is as bad as they have played at time, they've made some freshman mistakes. I think that they're getting better and playing better. Give me Alabama in this one. I think that 3 is just such a stiff number. I think they could win it by 3. The line's a little bit too close for me to bet on it. I don't even like the over under. I think that this game could really turn into a shootout if Nico is able to put it all together and connect with his receivers a little bit more. And I do think that he will. At some point this season, Nico will put it all together. Is this going to be the game? I'm not going to bet against that, because I've seen the arm talent. I've seen him make really good throws, make some pretty good reads, and then I've seen his lows as well. So it's tough for me to bet on this game. I've got a slight lean to Bama, but I think that we're in for a really good football game at the end of the day.